You're listening to the Vocabbett podcast, where I help students improve their vocabulary for the SAT, ACT, and life itself using my unique and research-backed story-based method. On this podcast, I'm sharing the best tips and tricks for a more enriched vocabulary and pain-free test day. Hello, and welcome to episode number 7 of the Vocabbett podcast. I'm Erica Abbott, a former English and history teacher, the author of the young adult novel Ahead of Her Time, and the founder of the vocabulary company Vocabbett. So I don't have much in the way of preamble for you guys today before the story, but because I love words, I can't resist breaking down the word preamble just for a quick second before we dive in. Preamble means introduction, right? It's the speech before the speech, basically. But if you break that word down, it comes from two Latin roots, pre, which means before, and ambulare, which means to walk. So we think of the preamble as like the speech before the speech, but it's literally the person who walks before the main person. That root ambulare you find in a lot of other really interesting places. An ambulance is something that walks a sick person to the hospital. Somnambulism is sleep walking. That som means to sleep, like insomnia, if you cannot sleep. So somnambulism is sleep walking. None of these words have anything to do with today's story. Sometimes it's just fun to pick a word and follow the thread a little bit. But for today's story, I'm sharing the beginning of my novelette, Death at the Villa Tarconti. I can't share the whole thing with you guys here because it's almost 50 pages, but it's free on Amazon if you're in Kindle Unlimited, and it's only a few bucks if you're not in Kindle Unlimited. You can also get it on Amazon. And this story, I would say, has a slightly different voice than some of the short stories that I've been sharing. Normally, I write these kind of tongue-in-cheek, almost satires, but this is a mystery story. It's a cozy mystery, which means that it's not really a scary mystery. They call them cozy mysteries, where it's more fun. It's not really meant to scare you. It takes place on a writer's retreat in Tuscany, and mysterious things start happening that mimic the story that one of the people on the retreat is working on. I'll include a link in the show notes if you want to keep reading it. We're going to read chapter 1 right now. And so if you want to keep reading, that's where you'll pick it up. You'll just pick up at chapter 2. And don't forget that when we come back on Tuesday, I'm going to be making a really exciting announcement about some changes happening at Vocabbett. You're going to want to tune in real time if you can, because there are some perks to getting in early. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and mark your calendars for Tuesday, April 14th, when I'm going to start overhauling the U.S. education system in my own little way. So with all that being said, let's dive into Death at the Villa Tarconti. Death at the Villa Tarconti, a vocabulary-boosting novelette by Erica Abbott. A small part of me wasn't at all saddened by Norm's death. He'd been a lecherous old man, and I'd only known the guy a few days. When he heard I was from Texas, his only reaction was to look me up and down, then ask if I'd ever been a cheerleader for the Cowboys. "You've got the figure for it," he winked. Gross. Naturally, I kept these emotions to myself. I was alone in a foreign country, and the last thing I needed was for people to think I was some sort of sociopath. And yet, the circumstances of his death, well, I wouldn't wish them on anyone, not even Norm. I shivered, adjusting the scarf I'd draped around my shoulders. Enough of this melancholia. I was seated on an impossibly comfortable, cream-colored couch, my feet discreetly propped atop a wooden coffee table, and a merry fire crackled in the stone fireplace to my left. Outside the aging windows before me, the rolling hills of Tuscany stretched for miles. The only other edifice in sight was another aging villa, perched on one of the hills in the distance. It was early October, not too hot, not too cold, and the air was crisp and fresh. Who could imagine that such unspeakable violence could occur somewhere so beautiful? I snorted, immediately realizing what a foolish thought that was. The Romans were some of the most bloodthirsty people in history. These hills had seen plenty of violence, from ancient times through the Renaissance, the Italian independence movement through 2 world wars. "Does something amuse you?" a sardonic voice to my right asked. The speaker was a man slightly older than I, late 20s probably, with tousled brown hair that had started to turn golden in the Italian sun. His dress was country casual. Khakis and a white shirt opened at the collar, sleeve rolled to the elbows. I knew from our previous exchanges, all equally acrimonious, that he was British and his name was Jack. "Not at all," I replied. "Just something in my throat." I returned my attention to the leather-bound notebook in my lap. It wasn't as practical as my laptop, but it matched the surroundings better. I hadn't written a word in over an hour, though I was supposed to be penning a best-selling novel. That's why we were here, by the way. It was a writer's retreat, and I'd scrimped and saved for 2 years to attend, saving dollar by dollar as a teaching assistant during the school year, waiting tables during the summer, even babysitting at night. The trip still wiped out my paltry savings account, but I was here, in Italy, a land in which I have no ancestral roots, but that I've dreamed of since childhood. I'm going for a walk, I announced, though Jack and I were the only ones in the room. Do you need anything? He stretched, shirt tightening across his admirable musculature. I'll join you if I may. None of us should be alone right now. I narrowed my eyes. What do you mean? Come on, Lucy. Surely you've reasoned it out. Jack closed his notebook, leaving a fountain pen in the crease, and rose to join me at the doorway. I was certain he'd stopped speaking at that enigmatic point intentionally, hoping to provoke me into wild speculation about heaven knows what. Au contraire, I remarked flatly. I have no idea what you're talking about. Jack lowered his voice. A knife in the ribs doesn't happen on accident. Norm was murdered, obviously. So the police and everyone else immediately concluded, I noted. But by whom is the essential question, Jack continued. The police haven't yet caught the killer. Could have been anyone, I said with a sweeping hand. A junkie, they have them in Italy too. A thief, who knows? On the grounds of the Villa Tarconti? Yes, I know what the police have said. It was far from the house, at night, anyone could have snuck in. But do you truly believe that? His eyes bored directly into mine, absent of all the banter and sarcasm I'd already come to associate with him. What are you saying, Jack? Once again, I pulled my scarf closer. I am saying, my dear girl, that there is a killer in our midst. All right, that was chapter 1 of Death at the Villa Tarconti. Like I said, it definitely has a little bit of a different vibe than the short stories. You kind of want to settle down, pull your feet up, and dive into it a little bit. Hopefully you enjoy it. I loved writing this story. It kind of was, I don't know, something that I wanted to do for some reason. Like I have always dreamed about going on a writer's retreat in Italy, and this is just kind of what came of that dream. I will see you on Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you're enjoying it and you have a second, I'd really appreciate it if you took a second to leave the podcast a 5-star review. All right, I'll see you on Tuesday.